Thank you. Well, today at the City Club of Cleveland, we're listening to Joe Solmonese, president of the Human Rights Campaign. Joe, I like your choice of suits, by the way. We'll return to our speaker in just a minute for our traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speaker now and remind you that your question should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country. Radio broadcasts of the City Club are made possible through the generous support of Case Western Reserve University. Our television broadcast partners are WVIZ, PBS IdeaStream, and Time Warner Cable. Television broadcasts are supported by PNC and Cleveland State University. And our closed captioning is provided by Nordson Corporation. Our live webcasts are supported by the University of Akron. Today is the final program in the Key Bank Thought Leadership Diversity Series, which brings speakers of national prominence to the City Club to discuss issues related to diversity in our local, national, and global community. Joining us today at the head table are Chuck Heil, Senior Executive Vice President, Chief Risk Officer for Key Corp, and Margot James Copeland, Executive Vice President, Corporate Diversity and Philanthropy, and Chair of the Key Bank Foundation. Would you please stand and be recognized for your commitment to the City Club? Also today, we're pleased to welcome guests at tables hosted by Charter One, Councilman Joe Simperman, Consolidated Graphics, the Cleveland chapter of the Human Rights Campaign, Key Bank, and Plexus. Now we'd like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including our guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Director of Development Jessica Leary-Allen and Education and Outreach Coordinator Deborah Agosti. Joe, would you come back for the first question?
These are very well-qualified microphone holders today.
Mr. Solmonese, you mentioned the various states which have now adopted legislation putting into law some of the issues you talked about today. I'd like to ask you about Ohio. The state of Ohio has had a long tradition of, shall we say, not being in the foreground of social legislation. I'm just wondering to what extent you think there's a likelihood that the state of Ohio, through its legislature, leadership of the governor, might begin to take steps toward having the same type of legislation here in Ohio.
Well, first, I have to give credit to Lynn Bowman and Equality Ohio. The people at Equality Ohio are brilliant and long-term thinking and visionary, and understand that that if we're going to change things, you really have to slowly but surely and by degrees change elected leadership here. And they have been really toiling on the front lines of that for a long time now. And you saw that in the last couple of election cycles. And I think that they are poised to make significant gains here on a number of fronts. Now, on the broader marriage question, it's important to note that each of these states has gotten there in different ways. Iowa's Supreme Court ruled for marriage and ruled in a state where it's very difficult to undo that. California's court ruled for marriage in a state where it is very easy for the citizens to rise up, collect enough signatures, put it on the ballot, and undo that. So in the broader context, in terms of where we go next, I would say that New Jersey is probably the next state that does not have a ban and is poised to pass marriage through its legislature and have the governor sign it. I think where Ohio falls into that, and again, I'm not talking about all of the many advances that I know that Lynn and others are trying to make for individuals and same-sex couples in the state, but on the broader marriage question, because you have a ban in place here, it falls to me in that sort of next round of states where we might look as a movement nationally at where we have lost those bans, and Ohio was a 2004 year, where we lost those fights and how we might slowly but surely come to turn those around. And I just think nationally we would look at that in the context of where we lost by the narrowest margins and where we might be able to turn that around. So for instance, I don't remember exactly the margin in Ohio, but I look at Lynn Bowman. 63-37. A place like Oregon in the same year lost by a much narrower margin, about 6 points. So, I would think as a movement, I can only speak nationally as the movement, I would think that is the category that Ohio would fall into, and we would look to see, when and where and to what degree we could begin to turn those constitutional bands around.
Joe, a question. Many, as you mentioned, many have been disappointed in the president's response and leadership on LGBT issues. If you were his speechwriter writing a speech to celebrate or commemorate the 40th anniversary of Stonewall, what points would you make in the speech that he would give, and how likely do you think it is he'll give that speech?
I think there are two things that this administration and this president can do. There are words and there are actions. And as someone who is working with the administration on a number of fronts, I can tell you that they're doing a great deal. And the United States Senate is a tricky place, and to move something that is seemingly as easy to get done as the hate crimes bill, where we will ultimately get 65 votes, probably 63, 64, 65 votes, we need the help of this administration to figure out the vehicles, the ways to get it done so that it gets to the president's desk whole cloth. They're working diligently behind the scenes with us on that and a number of other things. I know that they're trying to figure out the best way to overturn Don't Ask, Don't Tell, to do it in a way that, where they don't just sort of make a move, a symbolic move, or, an initial move like President Clinton did, and not have the kind of sustainability that we need in order to not just overturn it, but then implement the policy. But what I think is missing is the words. And there was this great article that Harvey Fierstein wrote for the Huffington Post, where he said, oftentimes what we look for from our president is what they call the grand gesture. So, it's one thing to be working behind the scenes, but it's another thing to arrive in California the day after we lost the Proposition 8 fight there, as this president did, and have nothing to say about it. And I think, when you asked me if I was the president's speechwriter, I think that, as the leader of the free world and somebody who was against Proposition 8, doesn't support marriage, supports DOMA, that there had to have been something that he could say to give a sort of a window into his thinking, or to his empathy with regard to LGBT people. And I think that, more than anything else, is what we are looking for as a community.
Joe, has HRC taken an official position yet on Sonia Sotomayor's nomination?
Yes, we support her nomination.
Nice to meet you after getting so many emails from you.
That's my standard greeting, or you're a lot shorter than I thought you would be.